What's up, Jets fans? It's Christian from the Jets Report, and today we're going to be discussing 5 possible trade destinations for Sam Darnold and a dark horse trade destination for Sam Darnold. So just to begin, Adam Schefter has been throwing around a bunch of rumors saying many teams have contacted and are interested in Sam Darnold, and he thinks Sam Darnold may even warrant a late first-round pick. Now, if Joe Douglas somehow pulls off getting a late first-round pick for Sam Darnold, as bad as he's been on the field, I would call him a super GM because that would be amazing. Whether we use that pick to get Deshaun Watson or we use that pick to help boost this roster and spark the rebuild process. But I'm not quite sold that we're going to get a first-round pick for Sam Darnold, so I'm sitting at the range where I'm thinking we're going to get a second-round pick. But Sam Darnold is still a 23-year-old quarterback. He's actually younger than Joe Burrow, and he's still got so much potential left in him, and he's a product of bad coaching and lack of weapons around him and a bad system. But in 2018, he had in 13 games, he had a 57.7 completion percentage, 2,865 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions. It was a pretty solid rookie year. I mean, it wasn't flashy, but he did show a lot of promise, and this was under Todd Bowles and Jeremy Bates. Jeremy Bates was a middle-of-the-pack offensive coordinator, nothing special, but definitely wasn't as bad as Adam Gase and Dowell Loggins. So in 2019, when Adam Gase and Dowell Loggins took over the Jets' offensive side of the football, in 2019, in the first year, Sam Darnold in 13 games had a 61.9% completion percentage, 3,224 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. It was a pretty solid, it looks pretty solid on the stat sheet, but if you're watching the games in 2019, stats don't speak enough. Darnold didn't look too comfortable. The system seemed a little too complicated. Adam Gase seemed a little too stubborn. And honestly, it's a product of bad coaching that Sam Darnold's experienced. In 2020, his most recent season, he played 12 games, and he had a 59.6% completion percentage, 2,208 yards, 9 TDs, and 11 interceptions. This is a season that put me over the edge. I mean, he looked abysmal in the field at times. While he's shown flashes throughout his whole career, some of the throws he makes are crazy, like against the 49ers in garbage time this year. But this year, he showed absolutely no improvement. I mean, I was expecting a third-year breakout. Maybe we could win some games. He could be competitive and give the fans some hope. But no, it was absolutely the opposite. It was abysmal. And I mean, there's a lot that goes on him, but also bad coaching and lack of weapons around him. But I'm kind of done making excuses for Sam Darnold at this point, and I'm ready to move on. I feel like it'll be beneficial for both sides. I mean, if you could reset Darnold's confidence in another organization with better coaching and better weapons, and we could get a first or second round pick in exchange for that, I think it's a win-win for both sides. So I'm making this video post Matthew Stafford trade. So the Rams aren't really interested in a quarterback. I don't know how much that affects it because I don't think the Rams would be interested in Sam Darnold, but I'm just giving that as a statement. So my first team I'll be looking at is the Washington football team, and this team has a great situation going for them right now. They have a great young defense with guys like Chase Young and Montez Sweat, as well as a great coach in Ron Rivera, who is very resilient. He coached with cancer last year, still put a good product in the field, and he really cares about the players, you could tell. And they did make the playoffs last year, even though it was a weaker division. I mean, they still persevered. They made the playoffs, and they gave the Bucks a good fight, who are playing in the Super Bowl right now. And it's an easier division if Darnold went there. I feel like he could thrive with weapons like Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson, and they could put together a good scheme there, and I could see them winning 9 to 10 games maybe. I mean, they did win 7 games last year, and they had a quarterback carousel. They had guys like Kyle Allen, Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, Taylor Heineke at the end of the year. I mean, there's a bunch of just crazy quarterbacks playing for them, and they still were able to show consistency on the field. And so what I'm looking for, if we do trade Sam to the Washington football team, I'm looking for the 51st overall pick. In my mock draft, I'll put the link in the bio to my mock draft, but I did make the trade with Sam Darnold to the Washington football team, and we received the 51st pick, and we took Tyson Campbell out of Georgia. I feel like this is a sweet spot where it's good value for Darnold, and it's a win-win for both sides. So my second team I want to discuss is the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan is aging. He's going to be 36 by the start of next year, and he has 2 years left on his deal, which is a pretty big contract that they gave him. And I feel like if you trade Sam to Atlanta and you let him sit behind Matt Ryan for a year, maybe less than a year if Ryan struggles, but I don't see him struggling too much. If you sit him behind a year and you sit Sam Darnold for a year and then let him play in the 2022 season, when Matt Ryan's 37, he's probably going to be on his way out in his last year of his contract, and you give Sam Darnold weapons that they have in Atlanta with Julio Jones, Russell Gage, Calvin Ridley. I mean, that's a great receiving core. I mean, that could rival a lot of receiving cores in the NFL. And you give him a chance to play in the dome with all those weapons, I feel like he could succeed, and it could be a nice reset for him, a nice change of scenery, a nice reset of confidence, and I feel like he could perform pretty well there. So if we do trade with Atlanta, I'm looking for about pick 35, which is their second round pick. I know it definitely has more value than pick 51, and if we do get pick 55 from Atlanta, we'll be picking back-to-back in the second round, which could be a luxury if we're looking at like two different prospects we like in that area. And I feel like pick 35, it could have similar value to a late first-round pick, and it could be very important to bolstering this roster. So team number 3 I'm looking at is the Indianapolis Colts. I know the Colts are definitely interested in Carson Wentz, with Frank Wright as their offensive coordinator, and Wentz saying he wants out, and the Eagles are willing to trade him. So if the Colts don't get Wentz, I feel like their second option could be Darnold, because you have to keep in mind, this is still an 11-win team last year who had an aging Phillip Rivers at quarterback, and they're not going to trust an 11-win team with just Jacoby Brissett and Jacob Issa on the roster. I have a feeling they're at least going to make a move for another quarterback to make there some quarterback competition and put some pressure on those guys, and I feel like Sam Darnold could be the perfect guy for him. If you bring Sam Darnold into a offensive friendly scheme with Frank Wright, who really helped Carson Wentz become an MVP candidate in 2017, and you put him at a great defense and a great offensive line, I mean, that's arguably the best offensive line in the NFL right now. I feel like Sam Darnold could be in a position to succeed, and I could see them making the playoffs next year if you give Sam Darnold a simplified system, kind of like they ran with Phillip Rivers. And I have a feeling the Colts are going to go out and get more weapons next year, so I could definitely see that offense improving even more with a good running attack already. And if we do trade with the Colts, I'm looking for the 54th pick in the second round, and it's very similar compensation to the Washington football team's pick, and I would be completely happy trading Sam to a good situation and thus getting a nice second-round pick in return. So the fourth team I want to discuss as a trade destination for Sam Darnold is the New Orleans Saints. This is the one team where I feel like the Jets could realistically get a late first-round pick from, as they're drafting 28th overall in the 2021 NFL Draft. The New Orleans Saints have really bad cap trouble. They're like negative $90 million in cap right now, and they're going to have to cut and trade a lot of guys. So I feel like the Saints, they could bring in Darnold and give some quarterback competition for Taysom Hill and maybe Jameis Winston if they re-sign him, but I don't think they can. So if it's Darnold and Taysom Hill competing for the quarterback spot, I feel like that could be a really interesting dynamic where they kind of split time and use Taysom Hill as a Swiss Army knife and use Darnold in more like normal passing situations. But also, this would benefit the Saints because they wouldn't have to re-sign they wouldn't have to sign their first-round pick, which could cause them trouble in the cap because they're hurting that bad in the cap situation right now. So even if the Jets take on some of Sam Darnold's contract because we have so much cap space and we get the first-round pick in return, I feel like we could benefit really well from that. And if Darnold goes to New Orleans, they have some great weapons with Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Jared Cook, and I feel like they could really benefit. So the last team I want to talk about, my dark horse candidate for Sam Darnold, is the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers, they have Matt Rule and Robbie Anderson, who both have connections to Sam Darnold, because Matt Rule was very interested in the job in 2018 before he was turned away because the Jets ownership was just being stupid. Honestly, Matt Rule would have been a great coach, but he was turned away and turned off by something in the Jets organization, and he went to Carolina. But if he was interested in that job, he obviously had interest in Sam Darnold because he was the young quarterback on that team, and he probably felt like he could grow into a great player one day. And you have a guy like Robbie Anderson on a team who's a familiar face. He was Sam Darnold's favorite target in the first years in New York, and I feel like Sam Darnold can really benefit from that familiarity. And on top of Robbie Anderson and Matt Rule, Sam Darnold would also be playing with guys like Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore, who are great players and great pieces that could help create a nice scheme that by Joe Brady, who's a great offensive mind as their offensive coordinator. He could create a great scheme for Sam Darnold, and I feel like he could benefit really well there. And now people are saying Carolina, they're not that great by looking at their record. If you go through their games, they lost a lot of close games this year, and I honestly think they're a lot closer to winning and becoming a playoff team than a lot of people think. And I feel like this could be a real dark horse candidate for Sam Darnold, because if they get Sam Darnold, I could see them being a 8 to 9 win team next year, and then only growing and going up from there. So if we do trade with the Panthers, I'm looking at the 39th pick in the second round for Sam Darnold. I feel like it would be great compensation for both sides, and we're sitting right around that sweet spot where we're looking for compensation for Sam Darnold. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below where you think Sam Darnold will go, and thank you as always, and go Jets.